Great.
And Naveen.
Uh, so, uh, Good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining. Once again, our disclaimer that this call is being recorded and we place our recordings on our YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, may wanna drop off now. And this call is joined by our Microsoft team members as well as members from our customers and partners. So, topic today is application gateway private link. It's in public preview, just been announced, available now, and we're going to talk about it, what this capability is, and what it brings to the table. I mean, why you need that. So just quickly, here's the agenda. As usual, we're going to do a quick level set on the um on our subject items, which is private link and Azure Application Gateway. And then we'll go over how to set it up. And we'll talk about some of the scenarios that it enables, and we will see a demo. So, and Q&A, hopefully. So let's see. This is Azure Application Gateway. If you don't know, this is our layer 7 load balancer solution. This is kind of a tied to a region. You basically spin it up and in a virtual network does layer 7 load balancing in a sense that you can do URL based routing. You can have your own rules to kind of do that. One thing to keep in mind, this is different than Azure Load Balancer in one key aspect. For example, to have anything in the backend of Azure Load Balancer, since it's a software driven load balancer, you have to have a VNIC, VNIC or virtual network card, which has to be from a VM or a VM scale sets, VMs in a VM scale set. You have to have it. Otherwise, Azure Load Balancer will not function. I mean, will not direct traffic to that IP address. So any IP address has to come from a VNIC. In this case, that is not the requirement. You can put a FQDN, you can put an IP address, anything you put it behind the scene, behind in its backend pool, and it will start sending traffic to it. Okay, of course, it has to meet the, have to set the health probes and all the goodies, but that's how it works. So just keep that in mind because we will talk about a few scenario where that you know that will play a major role. Okay, what is private link? Private link is a Azure network fiber level capability which allows you to access services over a private endpoint. Those services can be first party Microsoft services like Azure Storage, SQL, Azure SQL, um, app service, things like that, or third party, like you can create your own service as long as you have a private link service on top of it, which you can put a load balancer, standard load balancer, and create a private link service, you can access it. So what you can do is you can drop a private endpoint in a VNet and you can access that service that way instead of going over the public access. So that's one of the key thing about this particular feature. And uh, For example, if your VNet is connected to on-prem, then you can access that service from on-prem just like it's your local, it's exists in your intranet. So that's a very powerful feature. Okay. And I mean, you may want to look at previous session, we have discussed it in detail. So what is private link doing in with Azure Application Gateway? So now with this public preview, if you have an application, Azure Application Gateway deployed, you can create a private endpoint on top of it. Okay, so first of all, you can create a private link service and then you can derive private endpoint from it. And this opens up to some interesting scenarios. So let's say that you created an application gateway and it's serving your customers who are coming over the internet. But then there are other customers who don't want to come over the internet. They want to access your services privately, but you still want them to come through the application gateway. In that case, this is a very powerful feature. Folks, if you don't mind, if you're not asking any question, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. So basically, what will happen is that if you, what you can do is they can create a private endpoint to the application gateway. So now they are accessing your service over a private endpoint through application gateway. All of the stuff still applies. I mean, if you have kind of a settings in your application gateway, you know, kind of a rule-based routing and all, everything still is applicable, but it's coming over a private endpoint. And that can be a different subscription, that can be a different tenant even. So that's the value prop here. You know, any questions? Okay. So moving forward, the key thing here is one, and we will look in the demo, like how to do it. But first of all, is you have to create a private link configuration for application gateway. So before you can create a private endpoint, it's kind of an enabling private link on the application gateway. Okay, and you can create multiple configuration as far as I understand. Okay, you create that, and that gateway has to have a front end IP configuration. Okay, without that, it will not work. So once you have it, you will attach that to the front end IP address, and at that moment, you will be able to create a private endpoint. And with the private endpoint, as you know, there's always a private endpoint connection, and you will have to approve it. Okay. Uh, and by the way, approval is only needed if private endpoint is created by an entity different than someone who has access to the application gateway, who has a contributor access to the application gateway. There's an access required. So let's say that there is a third party, there's a vendor or a partner that need to access your service. You give them the resource ID or for your application gateway. They go in, and they create the private endpoint. At that moment, that private endpoint will be in pending state. You will have to approve it from your end. That's for security, so nobody can just go in and start creating private endpoint because they have the resource ID of your application gateway. And that's true for any uh, private link enabled service. Okay, so that will be required. Okay. There are some limitations. We'll come back to those later. Let's go with a quick demo. If there are no questions, then
Nothing that you had no read so far.
okay, great. Okay, so here is my resource group. I have already, since App Gateway takes some time to create, I have already created an App Gateway, and let's go to that application gateway. As you can see here, pretty standard stuff, you know. Let me open another tab. I want to show you the network as well, where application gateway has been created. There is the resource group, and there should be. So this is my virtual network, and these are the subnet. This is the app gateway subnet. Okay. So this is the Azure app. Let me just increase the font size a little bit so everybody can see it better. So this is the application gateway. As you can see, pretty standard stuff. You have the front-end IP configuration. I'm using a public IP address at this point. You have backend settings. So backend setting is HTTPS. And by the way, you need to have you have to have the front-end IP configuration. And let me show you the backend pool. At this moment, I'm just using an app service in the backend. You know, since the goal is not to show application gateways capability, it's to talk about the private link. Okay. As you can see, there is now a new entry here, which is called private link. Okay. So as we click on it, this is the private link configuration. Let me show you if you want to create a new one. So what you do here is you give it a name. It is private link virtual network. And remember, it will have to be in a different subnet than app gateway subnet. Just keep that in mind. Okay, it cannot be in the same subnet. It will take its own subnet, and then basically you will have to pick a front end IP configuration. And since I've already created one for an existing one, that's why I cannot create one. I will show it to you in a second, but you will have to have a different front-end IP configuration, and then you will attach. So think of it, one private link per front-end IP configuration. If you have one, you can only create one private link. If you have more than one, then you can create multiple. Okay, and then you can add IP addresses here, and that basically you can add up to 8 just to to support max 8 IP addresses you can add, and these are basically for NATing. That's the goal, you know, of these IP addresses. So let me show you the one that I already have. So this is the one I already have. As you can see, this is tied to the front-end IP address that we created, and I'm creating just one IP address since this is a demo. This is not an actual production scenario. That's what I'm doing, and I can add more IP addresses if I want to. And it is in PLS subnet. I have created a separate subnet, and just keep in mind it cannot go into the app gateway subnet. So that's that. Once that is created, then you can create private endpoint connection. Okay, and just keep in mind that so with the private endpoint connection, basically you go in here, you kind of select the resource group. What is the name? We can call it test PE, and it was a network interface name, and then you can say what region you want to go in. We are going into, let's say, South Central US, and then it's going to ask the resource. It already knows the resource. The resource type is gateway. This is the sub resource. This is the front end IP address. What virtual network? So it's going to ask you what virtual network you want to drop in. uh, you want to create it static IP, or you want to create a dynamic IP, you can do that. Application security group. This is something that you can set up NSG rules on. Um, that's there. Pretty standard stuff. And just keep in mind, it does not set up. Uh, subnet. Oh, come on. Okay, we select a different subnet. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. And then you have the DNS. And by the way, it does not do automatic integration with DNS zone. You have to create your own DNS and all that. Okay. Just keep that in mind. So once that is done, I mean, this is pretty standard. That's how any private endpoint that you create. And once you create this, the endpoint will be created, and you will be able to access it from that. Just to save time, I have already created a private endpoint. Let's take a look at it. This is the private endpoint, and this is the DNS configuration. This is the private endpoint address. And if you can see here, I dropped this private endpoint. So I have created this in this app gateway in South Central, and I'm dropping the private endpoint into this subnet. So think of it. My app gateway and resources are in South Central. Okay. But this subnet you can see here exists, this VNet exists in East US2. Okay, so uh, now I'm going to access that app gateway from East US2 over a private endpoint, and this all going to happen on Azure Backbone. Okay, no internet traffic over the internet, nothing, all through a private endpoint. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okie doke. So that's that. So what I'm gonna do now is let's go to, so this is my VM. So now I have a virtual machine that I have deployed in the in my East US 2 VNet where I have dropped the private endpoint. This is a Windows virtual machine, so I can access that. So let's get the IP address first. Wait a second to go away. I'm gonna go here and get the IP address of that private endpoint, which is this IP address. So this is the private IP address, as you can see, 10.8.255.18. And then I'm gonna go in here, paste this IP address directly here, and here we go. This is, so I am now accessing my app gateway through the private endpoint, and it is hitting the web app service that I have created behind the scenes. So think of it. Just to show you the diagram, just to kind of clear things up. Oh, come on. Eesh. Hate this. This thing is. Oh, so now I am stuck on this. But okay, sorry guys. Um, so this is the diagram. Please refer to this. So think of it that on the right hand side, this is the South Central, the virtual network B, where I'm running my app service and my app gateway. And here I am on the left hand side in East US2, and I'm able to access it. So kind of interesting uh, scenario. And it opens up some very interesting possibility. First of all, um, there are some services which are VNet injected. Okay. And though they provide you a private endpoint in that VNet or in that subnet where you inject them, example is API management. You cannot create a private endpoint for those services. I know API management allow you to create a private endpoint, but only for the public instance, not for the VNet injected instance. Okay, so that's so that this thing opens up kind of interesting possibilities where normally app gateway is used with API management. You have an app gateway and you have API management sitting behind it in an injected fashion. Now what you can do is you can create a private endpoint on that app gateway. And for some customers who kind of want to access it over private endpoint, you can provide that access to API management that is VNet injected over private IP addresses. And there may be other services that you have come across which natively, or maybe there is a kind of a third party service that does not support private endpoint, and you have customer who want to access it over a private endpoint. Now you can use securely, run application gateway, put that service behind it, and allow access to that service over a private endpoint through application gateway. So that's, I mean, it opens interesting possibilities which were not there before. So that's something I definitely kind of want to mention here. In terms of so
Reed, do you want to take a
yeah,
question while
yeah, please, please
before we
go ahead.
move on? Yeah. Can front door classics and traffic to these app gateway private links?
No, actually, here it is. That was
Can
about to say, yeah, at the moment, these private endpoints are not supported with front door. Okay.
and Naveed, since you came back to that slide, you mentioned a scenario where you have users uh, accessing your service from the internet and within the company. I'm not sure I understood that scenario. If you could,
Yeah, so basically think of this that you have customers who are accessing your service through application gateway. They're coming over the internet. But then there are customers who want to access your service, but they don't want to come over the internet. Okay. So they are your partners. They want to access it over a private endpoint. So that's where this thing comes into picture, where you can create a private endpoint to the application gateway. They can still access your service over a private endpoint through application gateway. So there, you know, in certain regulated industries, there's a requirement that you have to access it services over a secure channel. You know, they don't want to go over public IP or so um, that may be another way of accessing it where you are kind of blocking access. I mean, you're still allowing them to access the service over a private IP, but it's still going through the application gateway and it's doing all the good stuff, that you want to do. So application gateway is still as a middleman, but it's only accessed over a private endpoint.
but I mean, like Naveed, if you are allowing internet users to access it, then
No,
you still you.
absolutely. It's not you who is objecting it, it's the customer. So basically, there is a third party which does not want to access it over public.
Oh, I see, I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They
yeah, I
want to
got to
go
know.
over private. So their requirement is that they want to go access it over private. And there is another scenario where maybe there is no public access. Okay, that front end is blocked. You still
Yeah,
have the application gateway, but all customers are accessing it over private endpoint.
yeah, that scenario is clear. But yeah, I got it now. So thanks, Naveed. There are other question on
Please,
the chat,
go ahead.
Naveed. How would the customer resolve the DNS name for the private endpoint? Would the customer
Yeah,
need to resolve it with the
just
private DNS?
that is right. Yes, you will have to use a private DNS zone or your custom DNS to resolve it. Okay. As you can see, private endpoint creation does not create a private link DNS zone. So these are limitation at the moment. You will have to create it manually. Okay. The thing is, for the source IP address and the X forwarded header, they will contain the private link IP address if you're accessing it from the private link. Okay. So it will not be the the public address that normally comes in. This will be this address. Okay. So these are some of the things. And one of the big ones, in my opinion, is the alias one, because alias property is used to hide the underlying detail of your resource. So you can create an alias for a private link resource and just give it to somebody, and it will hide the internal detail of what your actual resource is. You just tell them, hey, this is the alias, and create a private endpoint on top of it. But in this case, alias is not available since it's in public preview. So these are some of the things you need to be aware of. Okay. And also another thing is static allocation for private link configuration object isn't at the moment supported. It has to be dynamic. And we already talked about the one where you have the private link configuration. It cannot use the same subnet as the application gateway. Simple stuff. But just be aware of it. So the point is, this capability is there. in public preview. So I would say play around with it and see what kind of interesting solution or scenario that you see it kind of that it can help you to enable. Any other questions? So that's pretty much it. I know we have 2 more minutes. So any questions,
No
comments?
questions on the chat. There are good discussion on the chat, but I don't see questions. But folks, if you have questions or if you want to dwell
Please
more on
open
the
up your mic.
comments, yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Okay.
I see a question: is there an ARM template that can auto deploy this architecture?
Um, I think there is an example. Let me see here. You know, uh, I think there is an example which shows you how to deploy it with an template. Um, Let me bring it here. Uh, no, I think we have CLI. So I have to see if there's an ARM template available. At the moment, it's Portal, PowerShell, or CLI. So I have to, yeah, I may have to wait for it. Um, yep. So I think still it's in public preview, so some of the things are still kind of in the process of being available. Okay. Anything else, folks?
No other questions on the chat, Naveed.
Great. So thank you a lot for moderating, and thank you everyone for joining. And hopefully, I mean everybody who is based in US, happy 4th of July. Have a wonderful long weekend, and hope to see everyone next week. And stay safe, everyone. Thank you. And Allah